Hi, everybody. Welcome. Plenty of seats up front if you want to come up to the front. So thank you so much for being here. My name is Ruby T, and I'm the Curator of Museum Education here at PAM. Welcome to the Fredi, Schiff, Levin lecture series, which is graciously sponsored by the Levin family. Now, in its 22nd season, the lecture series honors Fredi, Schiff, Levin's legacy as a member of the Provincetown arts community by inviting artists, curators, authors, and scholars to speak at PAM. We are grateful to the Levin family for their continued support of this annual program. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we're really thrilled to welcome Ron Amato in conversation with Pasquale Natali. And I'm gonna share a little bit with you about our presenters. Ron Amato is a professor in the Photography and Related Media Department of Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. Much of Ron's art practice revolves around his identity as a gay man. His first monograph, The Box, visually represents Ron's journey from a boy born into a second-generation Italian-American family in Brooklyn, New York, to his current position as a respected educator and artist. Ron's second monograph, 100 Members Only, Volume 1, is a visual exploration of the male phallus. He has exhibited extensively both nationally and internationally. His seminal exhibition of intimate self-portraits at Richard Anderson's Fine Arts Gallery in NYC in 2000 established Ron as a leading queer artist. He is a regular contributor to numerous publications with images representing queerness and male sexuality. Ron is currently curator of photography at Soho Project Space in New York City. Artists of Provincetown marks a return to Ron's first love, environmental portraiture. He has a BFA in photography from School of Visual Art, New York City, and an MFA in New Media Art and Performance from Long Island University. And I just want to note that there's a beautiful book that will be available for sale, and Ron will be doing a signing here in this room, so make sure to take advantage of that. And now, Pasquale Natali, our curator. Pasquale Natali is an artist and a curator living year-round in Provincetown for almost 40 years. Pasquale has exhibited his work in Boston, New York City, Hudson, Mass., Cape Cod, but mainly here in Provincetown at the Berta Walker Gallery, Albert Merola Gallery, AMP Gallery, Schoolhouse Gallery, Fine Arts Work Center, and the Adam Peck Gallery. Impressive. He has been on the exhibition committee here at PAM on and off for about 30 years and has been the committee chairperson in the 1990s. He was on the visual committee at FOC for 20 years. Pasquale, and sometimes with his longtime friend Midge Batal, has been honored to have curated many shows here at PAM. Working with Ron Amato on this show has been especially wonderful because the focus has been on artists who have belonged to the art colony we live in. It is his pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you again. Thanks, everybody. And now I am so pleased to turn it over to Ron Amato. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Ruby. Ruby's been fantastic facilitating this, as well as Amy, who's our director back there doing a live stream. So hello, everybody out there watching the live stream. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much for coming. When I walked in, I thought there were too many chairs, and I was assured that there weren't. So I'm really happy to see most of them filled. I want to just say that before I start, this is not part of the formal presentation, but my gratitude for being embraced in this community is immense. It's beyond my words, frankly, and I feel really enveloped in this community now and part of it, and I want to thank all of the artists that you see on the walls here and in the book for trusting a stranger, coming into their space, and trusting me to represent them in a way that I hope is authentic and that they feel really good about. So thank you to all of them. This could not have happened without them. So I want to start, I think, by, I was told I have to, okay, here we go. I want to start by quoting Michael Cunningham's beautiful introduction to the book Artists of Provincetown. I was very fortunate that Michael said yes to us when Pasquale and I asked him to do this. And I want to read this first paragraph as a way to set up what we're going to talk about today. When anyone asks me why I'm so attached to Provincetown, I generally say something along the lines of, it's one of the only places in the world where unconventional people are not just tolerated, but preferred. I'm happy about the fact that I'm not happy about the fact that the world at large considers artists, writers, musicians, and others, anyone who creates something out of nothing, to be unconventional. I'd prefer a world in which people who harbor no urge to create are the unconventional ones. We do, however, live in this world. In this world, people who create can, for the most part, only be considered for the title of conventional if their work becomes famous. The urge to create and the stunningly hard work it requires doesn't mean much. Success means a great deal. In a city like New York, people who are initially interested in the fact that you're an artist or a writer or a musician tend to become less interested when they learn that you aren't yet represented by a gallery, have yet to publish anything, or have yet to release a hit song. So we, whether we live full-time or part-time in Provincetown, have collectively established a world within a larger world, a place where creators are not only honored but respected for their efforts, a place where creators are not only honored and respected for their efforts, but honored and respected whether or not they become famous. They are, in fact, honored and respected if they never become famous. Provincetown knows, in ways many other places don't, that significant work doesn't equal widespread recognition. This understanding has been shared among us for well over 100 years. We who live in Provincetown now are the great-great-grandchildren of Hans Hofmann, who might have been speaking about Provincetown itself when he said that his aim in painting was to create pulsing, luminous, and open surfaces that emanate a mystical light. And if you want to read the rest, you have to buy the book. It's good. It's worth the buy. Okay. I want to just give you a little bit of, I have notes here, but I'm going to just wing it. I want to give you a little bit of my history in Provincetown. In 1999, I came here for the first time. A friend called and said that one of the people in his share had dropped out, and there's a room available, and do I want to go to Provincetown for 2 weeks? And I said, sure, what's Provincetown? So he kind of explained it to me, and I was young and impulsive, and soon was on a train to Boston and was in Provincetown. And as you can imagine, it was dizzying and disorienting, and I just spent my first week getting my sea legs, so to speak, and just figuring out where I was just transported to, and trying to understand the people and the place and the landscape. I was born in Brooklyn. When they say concrete jungle, that's my habitat. So the nature alone was overwhelming for me, and mix that with the beautiful men, I was in some kind of weird space of nirvana and purgatory, so to speak. So for the first week, I kind of was getting my bearings, and in the second week, I decided to make photographs. I had thrown a bunch of expired film into a bag. It was film for those of you who remember film. And before I left, I just kind of dumped a bunch of expired film into my bag and not knowing if I was going to make any photographs. And I met a couple of men who wanted to be photographed, and I started to make some stuff in the dunes and in the marshes and on the breakwater, as you can see, and just really getting this feel for the body in the landscape here. I had been doing it in Fire Island for a while, and it's a much different environment. And of course, the light, as you all know, is really spectacular. So, and different. The quality is very different. So over the years, I've continued to do that. I've been coming here pretty regularly, and I've made hundreds of photographs of men in nature and men in some of the more unique spaces in town. So in 2015, my husband and I were coming for our annual trip, and as interesting as this is, it can get boring, and I wanted to do something else. And as you heard in my introduction, my roots are in environmental portraiture. I am a devotee of Arnold Newman, who, for me, wrote the language of environmental portraiture and photography in the mid-20th century. I've studied his work. I lecture on his work. I teach full-time at Fashion Institute of Technology, as you heard. I show Arnold Newman's work in my class all the time now. I have to say I show my work next to Arnold Newman's, which is kind of nice. So I wanted to do this environmental portrait project. I also wanted to get to know the artists in town. I was a little bit frustrated, frankly, that I would go to the gallery openings, but I would never really get to know anybody. I would never really felt like I was breaking into that community. And as an artist myself who was spending a lot of time here, I really wanted to be part of that community. So I had a couple of motivations. I wanted to do a new project, and I also wanted to get into, break that kind of veneer over the community and kind of make my way in. So I contacted my friend Hunter O'Hanion, who was he was the director of the Leslie Lohman Museum at the time, and I was doing a couple of projects with them and FIT. And he gave me pretty quickly a list of about 25 names, like off the top of his head, of people I should photograph. So I started at the top of the list, not knowing anybody, frankly. I recognized a couple of names, but Pasquale Natali, who is the curator of the show that you're looking at, was the very first person that I photographed. And it's interesting because I think whether he was the first person I photographed or the 50th person I photographed, we still would have bonded and formed the relationship that we have now, and he still would have really supported this work and brought it to this point of what you're looking at on the walls around you. But it was just my good fortune that he was the first person, so he was able to really connect me to some other people, make some introductions, and kind of guide me through the process. So I made 5 the first year in 2015 and 5 the second year in 2016. And then in 2017, I was due for a sabbatical from my teaching position, and I had this really complicated plan of going to Berlin and traveling through Germany to make this documentary about gay survivors of the Holocaust who were in their 90s at this point. And I said, somebody has to do this, and I'm going to do it quick. It's been done before, but I had a different vision for what I wanted to do. But the logistics of traveling through Germany with 2 dogs became kind of implausible. So I had to pivot quickly. So the project was right in front of me. It was Artists of Provincetown. I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that for the sabbatical in the first place. So yes, I'll spend 3 months in Provincetown making photographs. Thank you very much. So I came in 2017, and I made 27 portraits in that year while I was here for 3 months. I made a lot of other work as well. It was a really fruitful and productive time for me. But this is when the project really took on a critical mass. And as I said, Pasquale was guiding me through all of this. I was almost in daily contact with him. And he approached me about the proposal for this exhibition that you're seeing here. I was very skeptical that the proposal would be accepted, but said, what the hell, I will try it. And sure enough, it was pretty quickly accepted. So then the pressure was on. So this low pressure project that I started in 2015 that was really for no real intention or outcome, suddenly I had to produce. So 2018, 2019, I think I did I think there's 20 there. So I did 10, I think, each summer, that summer. And then what happened? And I was like, okay, what am I doing? Like, how is this going to happen? So I came, I know the exhibition's coming at me like pretty quickly. It was, I think, delayed because of COVID, which is fortunate for me because I was able to get some more time in. But I had to figure out how I was going to do this during COVID. And so it was outside or with a mask on, right? So in some of the photographs were indoors, but we have masks on. But for the most part, I asked people, what space do you have a relationship with? What inspires you? Where do you go? How do you make work? So, and I went on some location scouting trips of my own and made some suggestions to some people, and I was able to start making work outside more robustly. And for me, it really blew apart the project in a way that was really, really positive. Because I started to see the town and the landscape as a character in this narrative. Which I wasn't really considering before. So now Provincetown was a subject, as well as the people in the photographs. So January, I have to name it that way, January of 2021, Seth and I were stuck in our Brooklyn apartment for about 9-10 months at that point with 2 dogs, and as you might imagine, both working from home with 2 dogs. So we were frustrated, we needed a different change of scenery, so we contacted our landlord that we usually rent an apartment from here, and it just so happened that January was open. So we came January of 2021, and I said, I'm gonna see if anybody will brave the cold and maybe I can make some photographs. So I contacted, it may have been Pete. Did I ask you about outdoor artists, I think? Pete Hocking, ladies and gentlemen. I asked that whose work is tied to the outdoor space. And I was able to make 4 portraits. Jim is right there. This is Jim Broussard at 6 a.m. on McMillan Pier in mid-January. So they were troopers, and I found these to be some of the more dynamic photographs in the project, and I'm not sure if it was the cold that made it dynamic, or the light was different. The light was definitely different, or it's just I was determined to make something work for me while I was here. So then we go on to the next 3 summers, and I just tried to crank out as many. Crank out's not a good way to describe it. I'm sorry, I don't crank out photographs. I make photographs. I just tried to get as many in as possible. So these were from those 3 years. Now, go back. Okay, good. I like go back. Tell me when. We're gonna have a question. We're gonna have a question and answer period. So if you have anything you want to ask, we can do it then. Okay. So when I was photographing John Dowd, he told me about Norma Holt. I didn't know about Norma. I knew about the portraits on the Fisherman Wharf. They also faced the sea of the Portuguese women. but I didn't know who made them. I guess I should have been more curious. So he told me about Norma, and that Norma had done had photographed artists for 40 to 50 years in Provincetown. So my immediate reaction was, shit, I don't have an original thought in my head. But then I quickly got over that, and I started to do a deep dive into Norma's work. And I first ordered a small catalog from a 1980 exhibition here called Face of the Artist. And I still have it at home. It's really worn and it's falling apart. I ordered it on eBay or something. And that had just a fraction of Norma's work. And then the next time I came to town, I went to the museum and I bought On Equal Ground. There's a long subtitle that I forgot, something about artists on the tip of Cape Cod. And this has hundreds of photographs of artists from Norma. And as you can see, these are all my tabs because this became my Bible, not only for people who I was photographing, but for just understanding the history and being able to contextualize where I was, what moment I was in, and what the recent 20th century, late 20th century history, not even prior to that, I was also researching that, but just the late 20th century into the early 21st century and where I stood in that moment. I also was determined to photograph as many people who Norma photographed who were still alive. So I made a list of my priorities. Every year I made a list of my priorities with names, and I prioritized people who were in Norma's book here because I wanted to get them before they passed. A few people have passed who are here, and I'm really grateful that I was able to do it before they passed. But I'm going to go through, and I was told to do this slowly, so I'm going to go through and show you. It's a kid. Before I finish, I just want to take a moment and talk about the mural that you see behind you now that's up on the screen and the evolution of that. One of the reasons it's there is so that I could include everybody on the wall. There wasn't enough wall space to really make a big print of all 84 people. But also, while I was making the project, the way my website is designed is that it emulates Tumblr, if any of you remember Tumblr, where you would upload these photographs or post, and it would be this irregular kind of grid it wasn't actually an equal grid. It was just putting blocks of things together in some kind of algorithm in an almost random way. So when I picked my website design back many years ago, I wanted it to look like that. So I still have that design. I've held on to it for a long time because I love the randomness of things that end up next to each other. They're not it's not affected by my decision making. I put it up on my website, and it moves in a way that suddenly two people are next to each other that I didn't necessarily expect or would not have made that decision. And it's free of hierarchy and judgment, right? So it has nothing to do with who's more important than who gets a bigger space than who. It is all the coding of the website design that does it. And I really loved that, and I especially loved it for this project. Every time I put somebody up, it just ended up someplace, and I loved scrolling through that page. It was one long scroll, and it had a lot of surprises in it. So when it came to making this, I wanted it to look like that. Of course, I couldn't do a vertical scroll because we don't have tall enough ceilings, but the horizontal scroll worked for me. And I also liken it to, this is an odd comparison, but I always loved the Vietnam Memorial because you curate your own experience with something like that. You, as a viewer, choose what to look at. You walk up and down, and you see different things every time, and you choose to focus on different things. And I really wanted that kind of experience for that wall. And I was very gratified opening night to see people doing it and returning to the wall repeatedly throughout the night, the same people, and discovering different photographs within that mural. So I'm very, very happy that it serves that purpose. And I would encourage you to have your own experience after the talk is over, which is right now. So thank you very much.
So we'll do a quick transition and get the two of you into these chairs and this light off your face.
Be gentle.
Okay. So apparently this is a little conversation. Okay. So I have just a few questions for Ron, and then we'll open it up.
Is his mic on?
I think, yeah.
Am I on? Yeah. Okay. So for me, this project is not complete yet. There are many other artists that should be part of this. And it only really got this large because of COVID.
Right.
Because of when the proposal was submitted, we didn't get a date for 5 years. So that allowed more and more artists to be photographed. So I'm asking, do you have any desire, any willingness to continue this project because for me it's very important and it's very close to my heart, this project, but there are so many other people. We would make lists. Midge was part of this in the beginning. Midge Patel over there, my friend. And so I introduced, she was photographed, I introduced her to Ron, and we would come up with lists and try to get people also that were still alive that we didn't get because they died. So are you interested? Possibly.
Yes. I mean, the simple answer is yes. I don't know when that will be. I'm happy to have this period right now after the like put a period after this this grouping and kind of enjoy and reflect and think about it for a while. I'm doing other things. I've moved on to a couple of other projects. So,
would you be interested in like slipping in with those other projects, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 a year,
or
if
5
we could
or
arrange
10.
it to, to do that?
Not tomorrow.
No. So I know that you're working on a project similar to this, having to do with Broadway performers. Did that project sort of seep out of this project?
Yes.
It did?
Yeah, because I was frustrated because I was only making work for the 5 weeks that I was here. Like, I was making other work in New York, but I was only making that environmental portraiture, and I really love, like, environmental. I really am in my zone with this stuff. So I was in New York the other 11 months out of the year and not making environmental portraits. And I thought, okay, I have to make, now that I've kind of, this has whet my appetite, I have to do something in New York. And theater is always, my grad degree is a performing arts degree. I worked in theater for a short time. And theater has always kind of been in my blood, so that seemed like a natural fit.
That's nice that this informed and helped with that. So during the 7 or 8 years that you worked on this, did you get any resistance? Were there people that you didn't get that you would have liked to have gotten because of resistance, or was it just scheduling, or was it because you just came to town, this guy, no one really knew who you were, and you started going to a gallery here and there and saying, I'd like to maybe possibly photograph this person, and because they didn't know who you were, you kind of got the brush off?
Yes.
All right.
The short answer is yes. There are a couple of people who are not in this project because they said no.
Right,
I
I know.
won't mention names, but there's a couple of people who just were evasive. I think they wanted to do it, but I couldn't get them to commit to an actual day and time. I think they genuinely wanted to do it. It just, I'm here during summer, it's hard. People are busy. It's really tough to get things scheduled. There were a couple of galleries, like I said, I walked into because I couldn't get to their artists somehow. I couldn't get contact information for them or whatever it was. And I went into the gallery and I spoke to the person at the front desk, and they looked at me like, who are you? And it went nowhere. So I realized quickly that the galleries weren't necessarily going to help me, except for the few where I became friends with those people. Like Jim Bala helped me a lot. And Deb helped me a lot. But there were other galleries that just kind of just shrugged at me when I asked questions. So I really had to depend on you and Midge, and Pete helped me a great deal. If you read the acknowledgments of the book, you will see there's a list of people who I would pick their brain every time, Ed Christie and John Dowd. Every time I would see them, even on the street, bumping into John Dowd is like a history lesson, right? It's insane how I learn something every time, the simplest little fact about something. So that really became my way of.
All right. When you started this, when word was going around possibly year after year that you were doing this and artists talked to one another, were there artists that came to you that wanted to be photographed?
Yes.
And are they all in this show or no?
You're putting me on the spot.
I don't want names. Did that happen?
Yes.
It did happen.
I had to limit it somehow.
Okay.
And it may have happened because we discussed it.
Possibly. Okay. That's
Right?
true.
I came to you with some people, and
That
you're
is
like,
true.
And there were people that I suggested that, well, I don't know who that, I've never heard of that. person.
There were moments when, and again, people are human, and I'm not criticizing them, but there were moments when somebody would make the suggestion in front of me about their friend who was standing next to them, and I just had to like plaster a smile on my face. Not that I didn't know anything about them, so I couldn't say yes or no because I was just meeting them, just hearing this name for the first time. So that was a little awkward, but. Yeah, there are people who I turned down who asked.
Now, so in the beginning.
Not to say that they won't be in the future.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So
Okay.
one of the things I liked most was your the way you dove into connecting Norma with you, and we discussed this, and I like that you tonight said that you possibly would photograph more people, but I wonder how 10 or 15 years from now, I don't know how many years in between you and Norma's book, really. Is it 20?
I think this book is 2021. Does anybody know?
So a good 20.
Right.
2001?
2001 is what I meant, right.
So 23
right.
years. Perfect. So, I don't know, how do we get someone interested 23 years from now?
Well, Ronald
To continue. Who?
Yeah.
he'll do it again.
My bony finger will come up from the grave and press the button. I've talked to you about this, right? I am hoping that I think it will happen. You know, I mean, I think another generation goes by and somebody will do it, and you'll have a century's worth of portraits of people.
And I think that this one happened only really because, well, you spoke with Hunter.
Yeah.
Hunter then gave you some names, and when you called, I trusted Hunter's taste, his opinion, so it got my interest to meet with you and continue it, and I think it just kind of snowballed from there. Anyway, I don't have any more questions,
Okay.
but maybe you guys will have questions for us.
I think Breon was. I think you're getting a mic because there's people watching on the internet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, Ron. It's a beautiful show.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed hearing you talk about the pictures because even though, you know, I'm very familiar with the project, I really enjoyed hearing about the group that you did outdoors and seeing them together. You know, they're dispersed here, but it gives me a deeper understanding of them and appreciation in a way. But there's something about the photographs that is a little bit glamorous and also have a very good sense of humor, despite some of the seriousness of the poses. And am I right in that? I mean, I know you work at FIT, and I don't know if that.
I'm not a fashion photographer.
I know you're not a
yeah,
fashion
so,
photographer, but you clearly have an eye for making people look really good.
Well, thank you. I attribute this to working for magazines for 25 years, where I want to make people look good. First of all, I know that there's artists and photographers who kind of relish making people look bad, like in a way. I always want people to like what I made of them. I think that's probably my background, being a commercial photographer. I was a wedding photographer for 10 years. I was working for magazines for 25 years. So it was about pretty photographs to a certain degree. But the humor part is interesting because I didn't think about that, but I think that comes from the subjects. You know, one of the things about those two things, the weddings and the magazines, is that I was often thrust into situations that were unknown to me beforehand. And I'd have to make really quick decisions, and that would come through like hearing people talk and observing what was happening around me and make these decisions. All right, how do I visually contextualize what I'm experiencing? And I think that really comes from what's coming to me. And when you say the humor, I don't necessarily know which ones you're talking about except for John Waters, but that's all him. I think it's coming from them, you know?
You got Irene Lipton to smile.
That's because she's... Irene, don't listen. If she's out there watching. That's because she's holding her dogs. No, and I'm serious. Like, I hope I'm not revealing anything about it. I think that you all know her and love her. So she wanted to be holding her dogs because of that. It just relaxed her. So her husband's behind me, kind of getting the dogs to look. So the whole situation is prompting that joy in her, right? So, yeah.
Didn't think I'd be number two. So I have actually a couple of questions that I think are related and actually build on the last comment. But I wanted to make sure I understand. You've used the term environmental photography or portraiture, I'm not sure which I understand to sort of be that it's not just the person, it's the things around them. Is that more or less accurate? So then my question is, I saw the show, which I really liked, and the pictures, how much, I guess, of what appears in the picture came from you? How much came from the sitters? It sounds like it was a collaboration. And also, maybe this is just a coincidence, there are so many food containers in these photos. Cans of beans, cans of coffee.
Does it bother you?
No, it doesn't.
It bothered me at the
I just thought
beginning.
it was
I'm gonna be
really.
honest.
I thought it was really interesting, and when you see them together,
Yeah.
you see a kind of
They
a
use
pattern of an artist's life.
Right.
In
They use
this
what's
place.
available to them. Recycle, reuse, what is it? Recycle, there were 3 R's.
Reduce,
whatever they are.
reuse, recycle.
There you go.
But how much was you and how much was them?
So it's interesting. So it's very much a collaborative experience in the sense that they're providing me with something. You know, they're showing me their space. We're talking about what they do, whatever. It's interesting because they don't see it until they see the photograph. Like, they understand they're in their space and that there's these things around them, but until they see it lit and cropped and the angle and the perspective and the lens that I'm using, they don't see it until the finished product comes in front of them. So it's interesting that while it's collaborative and while they're providing me with the space and the props, and we talk about, you know, should we pull this over? I pulled paint palettes over a couple of times to make some kind of a composition. Like with Frankie Rice, we moved those sculptures. So we moved the rug, he uses some kind of a dolly and he moves the stone around, and we made that composition together. But I'm sure, and he's a photographer as well, and I'm sure that he understood to somewhat what it would look like, but until it's lit and the lens makes a huge difference, the focal length of the lens that I choose, whatever it may be for a certain situation. You don't see it with the human eye like that lens sees it, so you won't know what it actually looks like.
And I also wanted to add that, like, when he came to this, is this on? Okay. When he came to my studio that while ago, he came in a station wagon, and then he unloaded the station wagon, and he took a portable studio out of the back of his station wagon. And I was a stylist for years in Boston, so I worked with photographers in studios with that kind of lighting. And it was amazing the time that it took for him to set up, but then to move for each, for me, I think there were 3 different sittings, I think. And completely different lighting, completely different setup. So I started to see it in, like, for example, when I saw Zirakan on the beach over there, that photograph in the red dress, that dress is lit. I mean, that's not just a day at the beach. That's completely beautifully lit. And he did that with everyone. So there was a glamour, there was a little bit of a Hollywood Harrell, there.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Could I just,
There was one thing that I learned recently, that I learned like maybe a few weeks ago. And one of my favorite photographs is Christopher Patterson. Can I tell this story?
Sure.
Christopher Patterson is right over there
The blue-
with
the-
the quilt. He's sitting by his quilts. And it's just exquisite to me. It just goes to a whole other time and everything. And it wasn't until a few weeks ago when I was commenting with him on it that he told me the story of that photograph.
Do you want me to tell it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I know you have another quick, let me just quickly tell this. So I photographed Richard once out on the beach, where Zira is actually, the same beach, because he's there every morning photographing him. And if you follow him on Instagram, you will see photographs of that beach every single morning. It's kind of a religious thing for him. And he was very, very nervous. And we weren't really quite sure. I don't think he understood how involved what I was doing with lighting and everything. I was bringing lights out to the beach, and so I don't think he was prepared. And neither one of us loved the result of that shoot. I did pick something from it that I kind of liked, but I didn't think that it spoke to him personally. It was just a pretty photograph. So. Fast forward a few years later, I did the P Towney magazine fashion issue a couple of years ago as a favor to Mike Miller, who I really love. If you guys don't know Mike, you should know him. And Seth and I came for like 3 days or something, right? And we stayed here and we shot at the A House for a day and a half. And it was all done with townies and local fashion. And Richard shows up with his quilt and his overalls that he makes, and I was like, and in my head I said, this is my moment to make a new photograph of him, right? Without telling him, I said, I'm gonna see what happens here, and I'm gonna try to replace that photograph. And that was the result of the photograph. And he said it to me after I was done shooting, not knowing that I was thinking it already. He said, maybe you can use this one instead. So I think he was very happy. His art isn't it, like the other one didn't have anything he made in it or any kind of reference to him as an artist. So I was happy. And who's that naked on the beach? Is it? It's not, who's the playwright? Tennessee Williams is like his bare butt is right there on the wall, which I think is
yes, in the A House.
which I think is a nice little
Right.
a nice little Easter egg there.
could I just say
Sure,
one
sure.
quick? I would sort of say, to me, rather than glamorizing the subjects, I think these photographs valorize them and make the artist valorize them.
Valorite, can you define that?
Make the artist look like a hero. And I think, especially given what you said at the beginning, I think that's a really important thing for us to see culturally.
Yeah. Meaning what we're quoting Michael Cunningham's
Yes.
introduction about artists. Yes, I agree. Agree.
You've sort of talked about this a little bit, but what was the process for any particular photograph? Because these aren't snapshots. There's a lot of work that's gone into developing the relationship. I mean, part of it's logistical, but but there's a dialogue. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Some was more, I mean, as far as dialogue between me and the artist beforehand, some was minimal, some was much more than minimal. Some people I knew for a long time already. By the time we got years into this, I had met them in many, many situations, so I knew them. So sometimes I don't like to know too much. I think I need a little bit of serendipity to happen. I don't want it to be too pat. I need to just be open to what's presented to me and not really go in with a predetermination. It's a very technical process. My husband will tell you that I come home with the equipment, all the batteries get plugged in, they're lined up on the counter, just like the whole apartment gets filled with the equipment to get it ready for the next day, for the next shoot, whatever it is. So there's a long technical process. I'm a very technical photographer. I was trained in a technical program, so and I was a studio photographer for many, many years. So when you say glamour, I wouldn't use the word glamour either. I wouldn't even use hero. I would use the word elevated. They're elevated portraiture, as opposed to Norma's style of working, which was completely different from mine and really of the time in a way. It's more of a documentary portraiture that she was making. I'm heightening the reality a little bit here through lighting and environment.
I want to ask you a question about the different kinds of artists that you photographed to see what the challenges are, because
writers are the worst.
Well, this is, yes.
Wayne is a writer.
Yes, that's what I was getting at. I'm curious what the challenges are, because I would imagine the challenge when you're photographing a visual artist is that they come with a visual language built in, and so you have to weigh how much this portrait is your creation and how much this portrait reflects their visual creation, as opposed to a writer like Michael Cunningham is a writer and he has no visual language that you associate with him. So how do you balance that, and what's the difference?
It's hard. It is hard. I'm serious. The writer part is hard. If you put Paul Lisickis is behind the wall here, but he was very, very challenging because he wasn't even in a space that was his, right? So not only does he not have props, right? He's got a laptop, which is the most boring thing in the world to photograph, right? But he's not even in a personal space. At least Michael's on his deck there, right? So there's some connection to him. It's interesting because you just try to make them human at that point. You're just trying to bring out their particular humanity. Paul happens to be sitting at his laptop, but his laptop doesn't play a big role in it. What I didn't realize, and I didn't realize until later, specifically the book Later by Paul, is that he's very, very good friends with Polly. And there are two of Polly's paintings on the wall behind Paul. I knew nothing about this when I made that photograph. But when I read the book, I said, holy shit. Can I say that on YouTube? I'm getting the thumbs up. I was like, this is fantastic that there is this person. He was in a space that wasn't his, but he brought those with him for the summer. And he put them on the wall, because I spoke to him later on about it. So I just thought that there was some kind of divine, I don't believe in God, but there was some kind of divine intervention there with that photograph. And he loves that photograph. I picked one originally where that was much more kind of bombastic looking color, and it was like, had nothing to do with him whatsoever. And that was my weakness. I just made a photograph that pleased me and really wasn't about him. So I'd say that was challenging. I also want to say that for the most part, I shy away from process photographs. I don't love when people are making in the photograph. There's a few exceptions here, Jim being one of them. because of the situation. I thought it was important. And Donald Beal being another, where is he? Oh, there, okay. And Michael Costello, which is a whole nother story, where I thought it was appropriate because they're plein air painters and like to get them out there actually make. But Michael was in, I'm sorry, I'm going off on tangents if this isn't really answering your question, but Michael was in this really generic room, like this, just this plain, those studios, where are they, on Route 6? Patrick's, right. So there was nothing in this box but a few of his objects, and the painting on the easel was of him. So I just had this idea of pulling the mirror over, like, let's get him. I said, Michael, how do you paint yourself? And he says, I look in the mirror. I said, let's do it, you know? And so that became a process photograph as well. Did that answer any of your questions? Okay.
Okay, we have time for one more. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question about eye contact. In most of the photographs, actually, when I first saw them, I thought they were all eye contact. And then, of course, when I saw one that wasn't, I realized. And you also talked about your collaboration with the artist. Was that their idea or your idea?
Where their eyes are looking?
Well, because they're, Midge is looking right at you.
Right.
So you have a relationship going on there. Jim, has a relationship with his painting. It's a very different kind of thing, and I'm wondering how you, work through that with the artist, if that was a conscious decision on everyone.
It's an interesting question. I haven't really contemplated what happens there. I make eye contact decisions in the moment. Like, it looks good or it doesn't look good. It looks good you looking at me, or it doesn't look good, you should be looking someplace else. And if you ever get photographed by me, a typical thing for me to do is go, look at my hand, look at my hand, look at my hand. And then when they get where I want them to go, I say, keep your eyes right there. And I take my hand away and they're looking at something. I don't know what makes the moment magic, but there's something, the right angle, the right gaze, wherever they're looking, it gives you, also when they're looking away from the camera, I think it opens up the space in a way. It has you looking beyond
I think you hit it every time, your relationship to the artist is wonderful. And that translates to our relationship to them.
Yeah.
Because, Midge is also looking at me.
That's right. She's following you around, so if you...
Right. Great, thanks.
Do we have to wrap it up?
I think we do. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Amy asked me to tell you that if the people who are on that side of the room near that wall, if you want to move away, they are going to swing the wall open so that you can see the rest of the exhibition. If you haven't seen it before, you'll get to see the 20 or so photographs that are on that side. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone.